June 15, 1944. A Seabee equipment operator yanks a rope on a 4-cylinder Caterpillar D4 while Japanese mortar rounds walk across Blue Beach, Saipan. He has no armor plate, no cab, not even a windshield. Just a 10,000-pound machine with a blade and a rope pull start like a chainsaw. 10 men from his battalion will not survive the day, but the ones who do are about to do something that changes the entire Pacific War. Because the airstrip those bulldozers rebuild in 5 days, using captured Japanese coral and a stolen Japanese road roller, will become the launch pad for the first B-29 bombing raid over Tokyo since the Doolittle Raid 2 years earlier. And the pavement those same Seabees pour on the island next door, that is where Enola Gay rolls down the center line at 2:45 in the morning on August 6, 1945, carrying the bomb that ends World War II. This is the story of bulldozer operators who built the runway that changed history, and almost nobody remembers their names. The men pulling those rope starters on Saipan were not Marines. They were plumbers, electricians, crane operators, and heavy equipment men from places like Pittsburgh, Tulsa, and Sacramento. They belonged to the 121st Naval Construction Battalion, the Seabees, and 3 weeks before D-Day, the Navy handed them Marine Corps utilities and helmet covers, and redesignated them as the 3rd Battalion, 20th Marines. Same men, same wrenches, new uniforms. Their job was to land with the 4th Marine Division on Blue Beach, just south of the sugar dock at Kanoa, and get a runway operational before the Japanese could push the invasion back into the ocean. Jack Edwards was one of them. Attached to Regimental Combat Team 23, Edwards would later give his oral history to the U.S. Naval Institute, and the detail that sticks is this. When his landing craft dropped its ramp, he thought the dark shapes floating in the water were kelp. They were not kelp. They were clumps of dead Marines in olive drab, killed in the first wave. His exact words from the record were, "We took that beach on our bellies." And this is the part that still does not make sense to us. While those mortar rounds were still falling, the Seabees started working. Not fighting, working. Their Caterpillar D4s were the smallest dozers in the battalion table of equipment, only 2 per unit, 35 horsepower. No electric starter. You grabbed a rope and pulled like you were starting a lawnmower, except the lawnmower weighed 5 tons, and there was a sniper zeroing in on anything that moved above the sand. Caterpillar built 15,978 of these D4s between 1942 and 1945 as part of 56,306 tracked machines that rolled off the Peoria assembly line during the war. Roughly 51,000 of those went straight to the military. But here is the thing about the D4 that nobody talks about. Unlike the bigger D7, which the British armored with steel plate for D-Day at Normandy, exactly 138 units came with factory armor kits. The D4 never got armored. Not one. Every operator who climbed onto that seat was completely exposed. If you want to see what those exposed operators accomplished in the next 5 days, and how a pair of stolen Japanese road rollers changed the war, hit that like button right now. Like and subscribe. The 121st Naval Construction Battalion lost 10 killed and 69 wounded in the assault phase alone. They were still short of their objective. 3 days into the fight, the Marines overran Aslito Airfield on the southern plateau of Saipan. The Japanese had built it before the war. It had a 4,500-foot runway, but mortar and naval gunfire had cratered it so badly that nothing heavier than a jeep could cross. This is where the Seabees did what Seabees do. 3 companies from the 121st moved on to that shattered strip and started filling craters, but they did not haul fill from miles away. They found something better. The Japanese had stockpiled crushed coral right next to the airfield, pre-staged for their own runway maintenance. The Seabees pushed that Japanese coral into American shell holes with American bulldozers. Then they found 2 intact Japanese road rollers sitting in a maintenance shed at the edge of the field. They hot-wired them and rolled the coral flat. 5 days after Blue Beach was a killing field, a Navy TBF Avenger touched down on that strip. It was the same type of aircraft that Commander Robert Isley had been flying when he was killed, strafing that very runway 2 days before the invasion. The Navy renamed the airfield after him. The clerk who processed the paperwork misspelled his name, and every map printed from that day forward reads Isley Field with an extra L. It has never been corrected, but the Seabees were not done. By D+7, the same operators who had fixed the airstrip started rebuilding a captured narrow-gauge Japanese sugar railway running from Charankanoa village to the airfield. They got the locomotive working. They got the rail cars rolling. 4 days later, that train was hauling bombs and aviation gasoline to the flight line. Construction workers running a stolen train, delivering ordnance to a stolen airstrip on an island they had set foot on 8 days earlier. Now here is where this story becomes something much bigger than one island. By October 1944, the Seabees had expanded Isley Field from 1 beat-up Japanese strip into 2 parallel asphalt runways, each 8,500 feet long and 200 feet wide, plus a crosswind runway and 100 concrete hardstands. They worked 2 10-hour shifts, 7 days a week, in tropical heat, with Japanese holdouts still firing from the hills. And on October 12, 1944, a B-29 superfortress named Jolton Josie, the Pacific Pioneer, touched down at Isley, with Brigadier General Haywood Hansell at the controls. It was the first superfortress on Saipan. 6 weeks later, on November 24, 1944, at sunrise, 111 B-29 superfortresses of the 73rd Bomb Wing launched from that runway on Mission San Antonio 1, bound for the Nakajima Aircraft Engine Factory in Tokyo. It was the first time American aircraft had appeared over the Japanese capital since Jimmy Doolittle's 16 bombers in April 1942. The co-pilot in the lead aircraft Dauntless Dottie was Major Robert K. Morgan, the same Robert Morgan who had flown the Memphis Belle over Germany. And what those B-29 crews discovered over Tokyo changed everything we thought we knew about high-altitude bombing. They hit the jet stream for the first time, winds screaming past at 200 miles per hour, scattering bombs across the city. Only 24 of the 111 aircraft hit the primary target. 2 of the B-29s never came back. 3 days later, the Japanese struck back. On the night of November 27th, 2 Japanese G-4M bombers slipped in low over Isley, while Seabee construction lights were still blazing, and destroyed a B-29 on the ground. Then that same afternoon, 11 A-6M0 fighters strafed the field at deck level and wrecked 3 or 4 more superfortresses right on their hardstands. Brigadier General Hansell personally watched one of those Zero pilots land his fighter on the runway, climb out of the cockpit, and fire his pistol at airfield personnel before being shot dead on the tarmac. A man flew 1,000 miles on a one-way mission just to shoot a pistol at a runway that the Seabees had built. Now here is the moment where the Bulldozer story becomes world history. Across a 3-mile channel from Saipan sits the island of Tinian. The 6th Naval Construction Brigade, 15,000 Seabees in 12 battalions, including men from the same 18th, 67th, and 121st Battalions that had assaulted Saipan, built North Field. 4 parallel runways, each 8,500 feet long. Briefly, the largest operational airfield on the planet. The battalion histories say those Seabees moved roughly 11 million cubic yards of earth and coral. That is 3 times the volume of Hoover Dam. The base layout was deliberately modeled on Manhattan's street grid, avenues running north-south, streets running east-west. Tucked into the northwest corner of Runway Able, the Seabees built 2 hydraulic loading pits, special pits, engineered for one specific purpose. The bombs they were designed to hold were too large to load onto a B-29 through the standard bomb bay doors. Those pits were built for Little Boy and Fat Man. At 2:45 in the morning, Tinian time, on August 6, 1945, the Enola Gay rolled down Runway Able at North Field and lifted off carrying a 9,700-pound uranium bomb. The pavement under its wheels had been laid by the same men who 14 months earlier had been pulling rope starters on Caterpillar D4 bulldozers while mortar rounds fell on Blue Beach, Saipan. 82 years later, 3 M4 Sherman tank turrets still poke above the surf at Canoa Beach, right where the 121st Naval Construction Battalion landed. They are a National Historic Landmark. In 2023, a NOAA expedition documented a previously unknown underwater dump site outside the barrier reef, and multiple amphibious vehicles in 50 meters of water, known until that year only to a handful of local divers. The old Isley Field is now Saipan International Airport. Tourists land on the same runway that launched the first B-29s to Tokyo, and most of them have no idea. The Seabees of the 121st Naval Construction Battalion received a Presidential Unit citation for their service at Roy Namur, Saipan, and Tinian. 10 of them never came home. The bulldozers they operated have no memorial. The runways they built with stolen coral and road rollers carried 156,000 tons of bombs to Japan, roughly 91% of all the ordnance that fell on the home islands. And the loading pit those Seabees dug with their own equipment held the weapon that ended the deadliest war in human history. If you know someone who works in construction, who runs heavy equipment, or who thinks their job does not matter, send them this video. Because the men who ended World War II were not generals. They were bulldozer operators. The next story on this channel is one you are not going to believe. Click it now.